small business? Like many of us, I'm sure you're feeling it. Business is hard. And now more than ever, you need to have a plan to help your business not just survive, but thrive. I'm Marcia Reiner. I'm a business strategist on a mission. I've helped tons of small business owners to establish and implement a tangible plan that guarantees sustainable profitability and guides your growth. I'd like to share some strategies that I've earned and learned with you on today's Profit with a Plan podcast. So I'm super excited to have Ben here with me, and it's Ben Winter, correct?
Correct.
Good. Okay, I had it. It didn't show up on the bio, so I was like, oh darn, I must not have had that listed on there correctly. So Ben is certainly hasn't been doing living an idle life for a couple of years. Out of college, he started doing things and going places that he never would have expected, from traveling to personal growth to marriage and child, and to divorce and parenthood to entrepreneurism and inspiring others. Ben has flown airplanes on his own and has scuba dived in the Galapagos. He has seen animals of Tanzania and has traveled all over Europe with a 6-month-old in tow. Now that's a challenge right there in place. He has performed improv over a decade, acted in several plays and even a movie. He now has owned several businesses. His biggest passion is exploring the mind. In all of his personal growth work, and there was one constant that stemmed it all from the mind. Between personal growth and improv, he found this weird realm called expectations. And while most people would shy away from such a thing, he decided to tackle it head on. Along his journey, he decided that the only reason anyone gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met. Duh. And beginning to teach that is his success improv business. From there, he noticed that there has been a way to use that upset feeling to fix a situation. And he has created an amazing how to stop being upset flowchart. From there, it was a simple step of taking everything that he had explored on the subject and put it into a book called What to Expect When Having Expectations. First of all, I love the title, Ben. This is just so darn cute, and it comes from any woman who's ever had a baby, right? Would know what to expect with that title. So, holy cow, what a story of you traveling around the world with kid in tow and having those expectations. Seemed like there was a little history of them that things weren't working out right, correct?
Yeah, I mean, throughout life, we always have expectations, and things don't seem to work out right. But we move on, we learn, and we grow, hopefully, and just kind of go from there. So
So, it sounds like expectations in my mind are something that we put on ourselves. It's nothing necessarily that hurt us when somebody else has expectations, but is it both sides or personally?
it's every side possible. So the expectations come from how we grow up. How we view the world is basically what's shown to us through our parents and through school and interactions throughout life. So if you grow up with two parents, you kind of expect that when you become a parent, there's going to be two of you. So the people that uh, it, have their parents that are still married, getting a divorce is like, oh, this isn't a thing. It shouldn't happen. Now, if somebody grows up in a divorced household, they're like, yeah, I got a divorce. What do you do? My parents had a divorce. No big deal. Um, and you think about anything and how you grew up, how you interact with other people, you expect them to have had the same upbringing as you, because most of us aren't taught that everybody lives a different life, everybody's raised differently. So yeah, somebody else is going to have different expectations on me than I have on them, because we didn't grow up in the same household. And even if we did grow up in the same household, I have different expectations than my brother does. And it's just his observations. He's also older. My observations, being the younger, we have a different view on life just from the same household. So expecting somebody who grew up in a completely different city, state, country, one parent, two parents, a family of 10, a family of one, they're all going to have different expectations. So First thing we have to do is just cut everybody some slack because we don't know where people come from.
Yeah, I have a friend that talks about giving everybody grace, and cutting slack and just giving them that energy that they need. How do we, when we're setting our expectations, how do we give that slack, right? I mean, we have our own values and beliefs and things that we expect. How do we do that? How do we just cut them slack and say, oh, easy peasy? It's kind of like, oh, just quit smoking, right?
Nope, it takes practice. So
Good.
there's no simple quick solution. But what I do have to say is that most of the time we don't even know we had an expectation until it goes unmet.
Mm.
And so we have those moments in our time where we're upset, which are great. I love them because that's a great opportunity right there to say, what's going on? What expectation did I have? What do I need to do with it? How can I grow from this experience? Because the first thing, if you realize that you just discovered having this expectation, there is no way, it is impossible for you to have communicated that to the other
Mm.
person. So right there, you can immediately cut them some slack because I didn't even know I had the expectation. So I couldn't possibly convey it to you. So let me take a step back and say, I just found something out about myself. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah. That's really hard. I mean, and it's a challenge that we face. I'm an older single mother. My daughter is now of young adulthood, and she puts a lot of things on me that it's like, wow, wait a minute, I didn't even know you felt like that. So I guess that's something for both people to give that grace period and that slack and say, okay, let's calm this down and talk this out. Why are you feeling like that, right?
In an ideal world, yes, it would be both ways. But as anybody knows with personal growth, you can only work on yourself. And
Mm.
the more you do something for yourself in the situation, the more they're going to pick up on it and say, okay, this person handles it differently. Let me try handling it differently as well. So that's kind of the trick, is to just, you got to change yourself and people will tend to follow. So
Perfect. Well, I think a lot of us in business have expectations of achieving certain levels or reaching certain goals, or the employee is going to do certain things. What are some of the tricks that we can do to make sure that we're setting good expectations or reasonable expectations of the things that are going on around us?
so that is a very good question. And the first thing is to become aware of when, um, you have to become aware of those expectations that you don't know about first.
Hmm.
And oftentimes, when you start out in a business, you're going to get upset a lot. You're like, why is this working? Why am I not getting customers? Every reason why like this sucks as being an entrepreneur. And each and every single one of those moments is an opportunity to look and grow, because when you start a business, you do expect to be as successful as the other people that you've seen as a success, but you don't know what they went through to get there. And a lot of
Mm.
times, again, going back to cutting some slack, you have expectations when you start a business on, here's what I want, here's where I want it to go, here's how successful I'm going to be, and so on. So you're going to start out with tons of expectations you didn't even know about. And those are great times to check in and say, okay, that expectation, is it reasonable for me to have that expectation? Well, no, I just opened the doors. Nobody knows I exist. Okay, let's work on that. um, but as time goes on, the more you become aware of the ones you didn't know you have, the more you can purposefully create the ones you want.
Ooh.
And a lot of times it's goal building. A lot of times we'll set a goal and then we'll fail, and then we'll set a goal and we'll fail, and then it's like, well, why bother setting goals? I always fail. So the opposite is, I set goals so easily that I'm always getting them, and so, okay, great, that's good feedback, you're getting them, but now can you set them somewhere in the middle there where it's a
Mm.
challenge and it's even more gratifying to get that goal, but you're not setting it so low that it's obvious you're going to get it done, because then you're expecting to get it done, and then when it doesn't, you're that much more upset. So there's this
And
middle ground with goals that you got to find.
And it sounds like you want them to be achievable too. You don't want them to be so far out. It's like, okay, I just opened my doors and I'm going to make $1 million next year.
Yeah.
I mean, having something that is achievable, but then a little on the outside of your stretch, right? A little
Yeah,
outside of the.
because going back to it, if you set every goal and you never get it, why would you keep setting goals? Like there's no
True.
reason to. It sucks if you're never getting your goals. But if you're always getting your goals, then you're never pushing yourself.
Hmm.
So you got to find that ground somewhere. And a lot of that is just setting those expectations with yourself. And sometimes you're going to fall short of something you didn't even realize you set upon yourself. So again, you have to say, well, I didn't know I had that expectation of myself. So now can I work that in for next month or next year or in the next 5 minutes? And, cut yourself some slack and work through it this next time.
Sounds like awareness is a big theme through this whole thing. A lot of us go through life unaware of everything around them, and they just think about, okay, this is only me, and not the things around them. Is there some sort of strategy or way that we can stop? I mean, just I guess when it hits you in the face, right? You're gonna try and look at it, but is there a way that we can kind of start to be more aware?
Yeah, so a lot of people will put positive triggers around or reminders around, whether that's in the mirror, on a refrigerator, in front of their computer. And, the flowchart that you mentioned in the bio is one of those triggers where you can have that
Okay.
up on the wall. I'll show it right here. So
Oh,
here's the
nice.
flowchart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You put that on the wall, you put that on the refrigerator. Uh, any place that you commonly find yourself getting upset. Might be the car, it might be the kitchen. It doesn't matter. People get upset all over the place. But if you have that as a reminder of like, oh, I'm upset. Let me look at the flowchart really quick because I don't want to be upset. And I reminded myself I wanted to do something different. That creates a level of awareness. It's just a trigger to say, oh yeah, I wanted something different. But the key there is the person has to want something different before they're ever going
Mm.
to be willing to become aware of what's going on.
Wow, I like it. So we have to want to do things differently, and I think that's the process. So many people go through that definition of insanity, continuing to do same things over and over and over, and expecting different results. So that change, we have to be aware of change, or the change that we want, and then we can be aware of the problem that's or the trigger that's causing it. Right?
Absolutely.
Love it, love it. Okay, so you pulled up a chart. The flow
Yes.
chart looked really like there was a lot of stuff on there. It sounds like there's some other steps that we're going to do besides just being aware, and aware of ourselves and aware of the others. What
Yeah.
what else can we do?
Okay. So the first thing at the very top is you're upset. Okay. So, because like I said, that's the trigger point at which you can do something different. So then the first question is, are you aware that you had the expectation? Most of the time, and it's probably somewhere in 90% range, 95%, we did not even know we had the expectation. And that's our programming. That's how we were raised. That's how we view the world. And then from there, if it's like, no, I didn't know I had the expectation, you now have a chance, an opportunity to explore that expectation. Now, sometimes we'll explore it and be like, dear God, I never wanted to be like my mom, or I never wanted to be like my dad. So here's that opportunity to stop being like your parent and do something different. Or, yeah, that still serves me today. I definitely want to keep doing that. Um, but then you have to check in with, is it a reasonable expectation? And if it's not a reasonable expectation, then you really have to check in with, why is it not reasonable? And can I modify my expectation to make it somewhat reasonable? And um, other pieces to it are like, have you shared the expectation with the other person, if it involves another person, because we have a lot of expectations we have on ourselves, but have you shared that expectation with the other person? And have they shared their expectations? Are you guys in agreement? Have you negotiated? Have you come to a common ground where you're both like, yeah, this is going to work? And most of the time we are too scared to even share the expectation, because just what if they're not game and that's a deal breaker? Now they're
Mm,
leaving your life, your situation, like they're no longer around. And a lot of people are too afraid of losing people to set the expectations. This is also known as setting boundaries. um,
I was
in a
just talking about that today. I never would have said, I never would have put the two and two together, expectations and boundaries, but yes, they do go together.
yeah.
Interesting.
So the common denominator at the end of the whole flowchart is have a conversation. And one of the things that we as people in today's world that we suck the most at right now is communication. And so,
So true.
yeah, I at the end of the flowchart saying, hey, you got to communicate. You actually have to pick up the phone. You got to talk to the person face to face. Got to use words and mannerisms, inflection, all the things that we suck at with like email and texting. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. Wow. So it is so simple yet so detailed and so unrecognized, because we go through life and we just continue on the same path expecting different results. And if we don't take a stop to look back and say, is this expectation right? Did I communicate that expectation? And all those other things. I mean, it makes total sense now that that's one of the pieces that needs to be in place for us all to succeed, right?
Yeah. And, like I said, when, going through the flow chart, I kept finding these little spots where it's like yes or no. A lot of the no's. It's like there's a lot of more. There's depth in those no's. Like why we don't want to share the expectation. There's so much fear around sharing
Mm,
something that might screw up the situation. But at the same time, it might benefit everyone by sharing those expectations. We have to remember not everything destroys everything. When we talk to people and communicate, sometimes we find a ground that's so much more beautiful and happy and loving and caring that it's like, this is the best thing ever. I'm glad I shared my thoughts, that sort of thing.
right.
So we have to get over the doom and gloom of, well, I can't tell anybody anything or it's all going to go to crap. So
Wow. So when we're doing this exercise and we're going through and that fear sneaks in, how do we get through it? I mean, do we just kind of, suck it up and go, or is there any kind of exercise we can do to kind of get past that fear? We all have fears of picking up the phone and making that sales call because we're afraid someone's going to turn you down. But what if it's the fear of saying, can you just do one more task to an employee, or, just one more sales call, or I mean, how do we get past that?
well, what is a fear? It's an
An
expectation
emotion?
of the future.
Ah,
It's
it's
just
a
another expectation. So some
predetermined expectation.
no, it's a
Or imagine,
it's not determined, it's pre-decided. It's like
pre-decided.
if I do this, this is the outcome. But it's never the case. That's called worrying. Fear of the future, worrying. It's all another form of expectation. And so it's just another opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to hold on to this expectation for a second. I'm going to go back to the top. Did I know I had this fear? Did I have this expectation that if I do this, this is what's going to happen? And is it reasonable? And sometimes you're going to find out you're full of the crazies because of how you were raised. And you just have to take that second moment to say, do I want something different? And is this fear worth it? Like, I can
Ah,
honestly say most of the time when I worry about the future, probably 99% of the time when I worry about something happening in the future, I'm going to make that 100%. I'm never correct. I have never been right once about worrying about what happens in the future.
wow. Okay. Okay.
It's
Fair
always
enough.
now I may get the same outcome, but never was I correct on how I got to that outcome.
Ah,
So
gotcha. Okay.
I can make up, like, if I send a text to somebody and they don't send one back for like 3 days, I can make 1,000 stories up on why. And then they'll get back to me and it'll be something I never thought of. So again, fear about what may happen in the future is not a reason not to do it. Again, you have to check in with those expectations. And a lot of times we'll say, well, when I was a kid, this happened at school. So now I expect that's going to be the outcome every time a similar situation comes up. Or I couldn't share my feelings with my parents because I was always shot down. So why share my feelings now?
Hmm.
I'm just going to get shot down. So we have all this stuff that happens when we're kids and we just don't even think about how do I move past that as an adult. And expectations, fears, which are future somewhat decided expectations that are probably not true, you just get to keep exploring through this process over and over and over and over. And eventually it just becomes like instant. You're like, okay,
Nice.
didn't even know I had that expectation. Let's move on.
Then you become aware of the problem, and then you can face it. So I like that. What are some of the ways that we can? Okay, we talked about the fear and we talked about the awareness and those expectations. What are some of the ways that we can kind of um, I keep using the word fear, get past that fear and have that conversation with the other person? Are there any skill sets? Because we have our own story going on in our head, and they have their own story going on in their head. And how do we bridge that so we can
Yeah,
make it better?
the only way to do it is just to do it. And it's scary as hell the first time. It's still scary the second time. But the 100th time that you work through that fear, you're gonna be like, I'm just gonna share my thoughts. And if somebody doesn't like, if they don't like it, and I'm true to myself, I'm setting my own boundaries and saying it's okay for me to share, the 100th time it won't be a thing. It
Won't
won't even be
matter
a fear
anymore.
anymore. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So every single fear that we have, you have to get through it once. And when you survive, you now have a new narrative that you can play off of the next time. And then the next time and the next time. And you say, I've done this 10 times. I'm good. You know, somebody
Practice
jumps
makes
out of an
perfect.
yeah, somebody jumps out of an airplane the first time. It's the scariest thing ever. The second time they're like, let's see if it's as good as the first time. And then they get to like 20, 30, 40 down the road. And then they're like, I want to do it by myself. And I don't know the process. I've never jumped out of a plane. I don't want to. But
Perfectly good airplane. Why are you jumping
yeah,
out of
I'd
it?
rather fly the airplane that people jump out of. That's my thrill. So,
There
because
you
let me
go.
tell you, landing a plane by yourself the first time has got to be way scarier than jumping out of a plane, because it's like the runway, the plane. If you don't land it, you're dead. It's like there's no parachute. There's no second parachute. There's nobody else in control. It's you in the plane. I'll take that fear any day. So
Nice, nice. I love the control thing because I think that's what blocks a lot of us or gets in a lot of our way is that we think we can control it. We
right.
can lead it, we can do better with it, but control is always elusive. It's always not there.
Yeah. I
That
mean,
that feeling on it.
in that situation, the only thing you can control is whether you share, regardless of the fear or not. That's
Hmm.
your control. The outcome is not up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is a business podcast. I'm thinking about business, but it's all relationships and our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our client, our relationship with the employees or the other people that you work with. And I think that that's the biggest challenge is we get that narrative going and that story in our head as to what we think and we build everything around it. And I think that's the biggest mistake that we can do rather than just going, hey, I thought you were going to do this and this wasn't done. So now I have to do it. Or, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And if you can just communicate it, you can make it all better. Sounds like that's the simplest version.
Yeah. So in the business world, it's very interesting because it kind of requires the top tiers to make it okay for people to share their
Mm,
expectations, because employees are often afraid of sharing expectations because they think it might end their job. I mean,
hmm.
let's just be honest. That's their biggest fear. They don't want to lose their job. So if management and upper management, CEOs, everybody up top makes it okay to share, makes it okay to have conversations, then it's going to go both ways, and they'll be able to communicate more effectively with the employer, with the employees, and the employees will be able to communicate their needs to the employers. And it reaches this fine, wonderful place of like, oh, I see that you have a desire to be doing something else that's going to benefit the company, and I've been keeping you back here not doing that. And you've convinced me this is a better fit for you over here, so let's do that. You're going to be twice as productive, you're going to be happy, the profits are going to go up, so on and so forth. But oftentimes employees are just like, well, maybe if that position opens up, I can apply for it. But if the employer doesn't even know that the person's interested,
You
they
may go
might.
hire someone on the street first.
Exactly. So
Hmm.
it's, if you create an environment of communication that's safe. It's like, yeah, you can come talk to me about whatever. You're not going to lose your job, um, within reason, obviously, but
And respectfully, yes.
yeah, respect. So, it's another expectation. I expect it to be respectful, but that's two-way street, and you got to make it safe so that they can feel safe to do so. And again, when you start communicating, when you start sharing expectations, you find some amazing, beautiful things happening in companies, and people are happy. And when they're happy, they don't want to leave. And employee retention is such a thing that, like, keeping people around is almost bigger than anything like right now. So, it's just, it all works together. And it, unfortunately, it starts at the top down because,
Mm.
I mean, some employees will try to communicate it effectively and share their expectations, and sometimes it works out, but most of the time they need to feel safe enough to do so.
Right. I think when we're able to share that expectation, I think it can exponentially help many areas. Like you mentioned, traveling it down and back up, but also out.
Mhm.
So with our expectations, when we have a client relationship, when we're setting and laying out, here's what you can expect. So that way they're aware of when you're going to call them and when the piece is going to arrive or when the next step is going to happen. These are all really important things that are often communicated with that you should have them communicated with your client. But it's neat that it goes around inside, outside, up, and down.
Yeah, and client expectation setting is huge, 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 huge,
Right?
huge, huge. If somebody hasn't figured that out, they definitely have not been in business for very long. Setting
Or they
expectations is
won't be
huge.
in for business for very long.
Exactly. But while you were saying that, I was thinking, outward also means like sideways in the company. So like
Hmm.
teams,
Hmm.
if a team, one of the things that I love about doing improv is that the people I'm on stage with, we all follow the same set of rules. Because if you've ever done improv, there's rules that people follow. It's not just get up on stage and go. You've got to
Right.
have the foundation. So what I teach in the company that I own is those rules and skills of improv within a team, so that should the team have to work on a project together, or obviously they're working together all the time in one way or another, their effective communication goes up so that everybody's happier on, oh, you're going to work on that, I'm going to work on this, we'll reconnect tomorrow, we're setting expectations, we're communicating, and all is well. Because there are some teams out there where it's like, I don't know what Jimmy did today, I don't know what Jane does at this company, like nobody knows what Tom does. It's like now there's contention and hatred for each other, as opposed to like, let's work together, and, oh, Tom's having a bad day, let's help him out, whatever it might be. So yeah, it's every direction possible, up, down, in, out, left, right. It works everywhere. It's amazing.
It is amazing, and I really didn't put two and two together until we've gotten into this conversation of how important the expectation, your expectations as well as others, and managing others' expectations are to everything that we do: family, relationships, business. My goodness, driving a car. You're driving, you're expecting this guy to stay in his lane, right? And he doesn't. And so yeah, I mean, there's just so many different avenues, and the importance of realizing what to do with those expectations. This has been super
Yes.
important conversation.
Yeah, it really does. It goes to absolutely every aspect of our lives. We always have expectations. Anybody that says, well, just don't have expectations, is an
Have low
expectation of not having.
expectations. Have low
Yeah.
expectations. I don't
It,
expect to get a guy, right?
yeah. So like, just expecting not to have expectations is an expectation. So I mean, it's silly. You grew up, you have expectations. It's just human nature. And setting expectations low, I mean, if you do that often enough, yeah, you're going to have set low expectations, but then you're never going to expect amazing things either. So you just got to play with it.
I love it. I love it. And when we started our company, as business owners, we expected to do something different and make money doing it. And if you don't set them properly, you're not going to get where you want. And that's probably why businesses fail so much, is not setting those clear
Exactly.
expectations and then making the plan to execute them. So it's super, super important. Well, thanks, Ben. This was really good stuff. This is interesting. and the way that it ripples out through everything in your life. So I think this is great. So where can listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, there's a couple places. The first one, if you want the flowchart, head over to havingexpectations.com. It's free download. Print out as many as you want, put them on your fridge, your work computer, your wherever, put them everywhere. Plaster the world.
Put them in your kids' room.
Yeah, definitely put them in the kids' room. Just subtle hints. Hey, kids,
Hey.
And then also successimprov.com is another great website to check out.
I love it. So real briefly, tell us about Success Improv and what you actually do there.
So Success Improv is where we go out and we teach team building to companies and groups of people, using the tools and techniques of improv to make a better work environment, team build, all that fun stuff. So everything we just talked about today.
Which is so important. And that's why it was such a natural conversation for us here today. So thanks, Ben. Hey, listeners, I hope you've gotten an idea or two or three or four that you can put into your business to become more profitable, and not even just your business, but your life that can really help. So Ben was really helpful with that. So considering what's happened to businesses this year, now more than ever, it's important to create your own profit plan so that you too can have a thriving business. And I have for you 6 easy action tips that you can put into your business right now that will make a huge impact. So you too can go get them at failproofbiz, that's biz.com. And Ben and I would love to hear any of your questions, ideas, or even feedback for future shows. Please subscribe and comment on today's podcast. And you can always catch Profit with a Plan on any of your favorite podcast players. And looking forward to more great profitable information on next week's show. So until then, make your plans and profit with them. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for having me.